She cries and kingdoms kneel, not because her pain is true, but because yours is invisible. She trembles and armies hesitate, not because she's weak, but because she knows the cost of appearing so. She doesn't seduce you with her strength, she dismantles you with her fragility. A single tear in the right moment is more strategic than 1,000 commands. And you, the knight, the savior, the fool you call this love. But the dagger is not always held in a clenched fist. Sometimes it glints in the eyes of the helpless. You mistake surrender for sincerity, but submission can be a strategy, and you, the man of logic, pride, and calculation, you are undone not by force, but by softness, by the trembling voice that only seems to need protection. She doesn't conquer you, she makes you offer the throne yourself. You thought her intuition was mystical, a divine whisper, something ancient, feminine, and pure, untouched by the cold logic of your world. You thought her hunches, her sudden silences, her uncanny foresight came from some deep, spiritual wellspring, as if womanhood itself was connected to the secret algorithms of the universe. You called it women's intuition. You respected it, feared it, even envied it. But you were deceived. Her intuition is not sacred. It is not spiritual. It is not wisdom. It is strategy. 1,000 years of danger encoded into instinct. A mask of the divine to hide the mechanisms of survival. Because she has never had the luxury of strength, only the necessity of reading it. While you were taught to conquer, she was forced to anticipate the conqueror. She watches your tone shift before your words catch up. She hears the footsteps outside the door and knows if they're drunk or dangerous. She scans the room not to understand it, but to position herself inside it. What you call emotional intelligence is nothing but evolved calculation. The way a deer flinches at the crack of a branch, or a snake learns the warmth of a predator's breath, and you mistake it for magic. No, her intuition is not a gift, it is a weapon, and like any weapon, it is concealed behind innocence. Do you think the look in her eyes, the pause in her voice, the perfect moment she chooses to cry, do you think it's an accident? You've never studied silence the way she has. You've never needed to. Her entire life has been a rehearsal for how to react without appearing reactive, how to control without appearing controlling, how to extract without demanding. Her genius is not in speaking, but in timing, not in knowing truth, but in knowing you. She doesn't see through reality, she sees through you, and that's all she needs. But you wanted to believe. You wanted to believe she just felt things, just knew things, as if the gods whispered in her ear what your reason could not detect. You turned her into a prophet when she was simply a survivor. You romanticized her threat, and that was your error, because when you glorify the blade, you forget it can cut you. When you put her intuition on a pedestal, you fail to notice its aim downward toward your open throat. She calls it instinct, but instinct is never neutral. It adapts to the environment, and her environment has always been male judgment, male desire, male violence, male power. So her instincts evolved to navigate it, to bend it, to subvert it. Her intuition is not divine, it is defensive. But defense, in her world, is often indistinguishable from manipulation, not because she's evil, but because she's outnumbered. Every woman has learned quietly how to read the temperature of a man's ego without making it obvious. She has learned how to be intuitive the same way a spy learns how to lie out of necessity. You thought she was ethereal, but she was just practiced. You thought she could feel things you couldn't, but she could just read what you broadcast. Your micro expressions, your breathing, the minor delays in your words. She doesn't need to know the truth of the world. She only needs to know what you want to be true. And in giving her the illusion of sacred sight, you surrendered your power. She didn't ask for it. You offered it, on your knees. You thought love was a sanctuary, a temple where two people disarmed themselves, laid down their weapons, and entered naked into truth. You thought it was the great equalizer, the one force untouched by politics, unaffected by power. You believed that when two people fell in love, they surrendered together. That love was pure, unguarded, and mutual. But love, real love, the kind you obsess over, has never been mutual surrender. It is mutual leverage, a game of exchanged vulnerabilities masquerading as intimacy. You give her your heart, she gives you hers, but each one clutches the other's offering like a hostage. You don't fall in love, you position yourself in it. Carefully, you show only what gains favor. You conceal what might tip the scale. You amplify your virtues. You hide your instincts. You perform. And so does she. Every word, every gaze, every silence is a move in a dance where neither of you truly lets go, because to let go is to lose ground. The one who needs less always wins. The one who can walk away always holds the crown. And she knows it. She learned it before she even had words for it. When she looks at you with wide eyes and says, "I've never felt this before," you believe it. Not because it's true, but because you need it to be true. You want to believe you're the one who shattered her walls. But love doesn't shatter walls. It paints over them. It disguises control as vulnerability. She says, "I trust you," but she's watching every response, every hesitation, every flicker in your tone, because trust, for her, is a transaction. She offers softness to gain influence. You offer strength to feel chosen. And neither of you realizes you're no longer loving. You're negotiating. You thought love was the absence of power, but look again. It is defined by power. It thrives on the tension between exposure and control. She gives just enough to make you crave more. You give just enough to make her chase security. And in this tug of war, neither side wants equilibrium. They want reassurance on their terms. She doesn't want to be safe. She wants to be irreplaceable. And so do you. Not cherished, chosen, not seen, worshipped. Love is not about dissolving egos. It is about feeding them in disguise. You don't seek love because you want peace. You seek it because you want leverage over your own emptiness. And she offers the illusion that this emptiness can be soothed. That her presence means you've won. That her touch validates your worth. But what is she offering you? Really, a mirror. A mirror that reflects only the version of yourself she's willing to admire. And in exchange, you become what she needs: the protector, the provider, the proof. And now, you're trapped, not in love, but in a mutual performance of loyalty. Love is not two souls embracing in naked truth. It is two minds calculating how much they can give without losing position, how much they can show without becoming replaceable. Every "I love you" is weighed, every silence is interpreted, every kiss is scored, not consciously but structurally, because when the masks fall, so does the game. And the game is all you really knew. You said, "I would die for her," but would you live with her power over you? Would you live knowing she can unmake your pride with a word? That her withdrawal is your undoing, that your dependence is her currency? Love is not surrender. It's strategy dressed in roses. You were not ready. Not for her, not for the silence, and certainly not for the truth. You built your beliefs like a child builds a fortress out of sand, with wonder, with hope, and with no concept of the tide. And when it came, when the truth rose in her eyes, in her absence, in her indifference, you shattered, because you had never prepared to face the world without your illusions. You called it heartbreak, but it was ego death. It was the collapse of everything you thought made you strong. You didn't lose her. You lost the version of yourself she let you believe in, and that broke you. You thought love would be the crown. Instead, it became the guillotine, because every fantasy you projected onto her, the nurturer, the savior, The reward wasn't hers to hold. You gave her the power and then cursed her for using it. You turned her into the answer to your suffering, and when she stopped playing the role, you called her cruel. But she was never your salvation. She was just the surface onto which you etched your hopes. When that surface cracked, it wasn't her who broke, it was you. Because the truth isn't that she lied. The truth is that you wanted to be lied to. You needed to believe she was different, that she was incapable of strategy, incapable of ego, incapable of the cold logic that lives in every human soul. You needed her to be pure, because that's the only thing that could justify your vulnerability. But when the truth hit, when you saw that her love had conditions, her care had limits, her tears had motives, you didn't just grieve her, you grieved your own naivety. You met the version of yourself that believed in fairy tales, and you buried him. Most men do not survive this funeral. They drown in bitterness, in misogyny, in mockery. They retreat. They build walls. They say, never again. They trade hope for manipulation, belief for control. But the man who survives truly survives is the one who burns the illusion and does not replace it with armor. The one who grows up, not into cynicism, but into clarity. He doesn't reject women. He stops worshipping them. He doesn't fear emotion. He stops using it as a drug. He no longer falls in love with what she represents because he has finally met himself without her. You see, the boy in you wants a goddess. He wants the woman who sees him, believes in him, redeems him. The boy needs her tears to feel heroic. He needs her softness to soften his rage. But the man doesn't need to be needed. He doesn't seek completion in her gaze. He sees her clearly powerful, calculating, vulnerable, dangerous, and he does not flinch. He does not romanticize her. He does not vilify her. He recognizes her as she is, and in that recognition, he meets himself. But most men don't want the truth. They want the dream. They would rather die inside a fantasy than live in a world without it. Because the dream comforts, the truth demands. The dream keeps you innocent. The truth makes you responsible. And responsibility is the final stage of love, not for her, but for yourself. When the mask drops, when the illusion dies, when you stand naked in the ruins of your expectations, that is the moment of choice. Grow up or break. You would think the first betrayal would be enough. That after watching the dream collapse in your hands, after seeing her mask slip, after realizing your love was leverage, your vulnerability a bargaining chip, you'd change. You'd learn. You'd step out of the theater, but you don't. You return to it. Again and again. Same stage, same script, only the actress changes. You swap faces, names, bodies, but the myth remains. She smiles a little differently, cries on a different cue, wears pain like a new perfume, but the role is ancient, and you are still casting for salvation. Because deep down, you are not addicted to women. You are addicted to the story. The one where she needs you, the one where she heals you, the one where love erases the weight of your failures and makes you worthy without effort. The myth that somewhere out there is a woman who will rewrite your past by simply believing in your potential. And so you chase her, not for who she is, but for what she represents, the exit from yourself. And this is why you always return to the beginning, because you've never left it. You convince yourself this one is different. She's not manipulative. She's wounded. She doesn't use tears. She's just emotional. She doesn't test your loyalty. She's just insecure. You reframe every red flag into romantic struggle. Every contradiction becomes depth. Every hesitation becomes mystery. But what you're really doing is rewriting the myth, layering new makeup over the corpse of your last illusion, because facing the truth would mean facing your complicity, and you'd rather suffer again than do that. So you rewrite the narrative, You say she's not like the others. But you haven't changed, so how could she be? You brought the same illusions into a new chapter. You hid your needs inside compliments. You offered protection, not out of strength, but out of desperation to be indispensable. You wanted to be chosen, and you were willing to perform whatever role secured the part. And when she began to direct the scene, when her needs eclipsed yours, when her flaws no longer fit the fantasy, you recoiled. You began the slow withdrawal or the violent blame, and then, once again, you walked away not from her, but from yourself. This is the cycle. You don't date women, you audition them for a part in a play you refuse to stop producing. A play where you get to be the savior, or the victim, or the misunderstood genius. You cast them as innocent, or dangerous, or redemptive depending on what emotional drug you're craving. And when they break character, when they show you they're real human, strategic, selfish, tired, you accuse them of betrayal. But they never agreed to the role. You just handed them the script. You go back to the myth because the myth is comfortable, predictable. It allows you to stay a boy in a man's body. It lets you suffer without evolving. It gives you something to hate, to love, to chase. And so the cycle continues. You mourn the actress, burn the costume, swear off the stage, and then build it all again. Because it's not her you can't let go of. It's the fantasy that still owns you. You told yourself it was love. That feeling in your chest, that obsession in your mind, that ache when she pulled away, you called it love. But it wasn't. It was possession, projection, worship of an illusion you created and forced her to wear. You never loved her, not the raw, complex, contradictory woman standing in front of you. You loved the image, the role, the performance. You loved the way she made you feel, not the truth of who she was. Because the moment she stopped playing your script, the moment she showed signs of being real, difficult, selfish, flawed, your love turned to doubt, then to resentment, then to silence. It was never about knowing her. It was about needing her to be a mirror for your fantasy, a living symbol of your worth. Her beauty validated your hunger. Her dependence flattered your ego. Her admiration gave you a reason to exist. And so you ignored the parts that didn't fit the sharp edges, the doubts, the autonomy. You called her the one. Not because she was, but because you couldn't bear the thought of being no one. You loved her as long as she played the part. When she stopped, so did your affection. This is what most men call love, a transaction disguised as devotion. You give her your time, your strength, your promises not freely, but in exchange for emotional return, affirmation, sex, submission, meaning. And when that return begins to diminish, your spirit follows. You don't mourn her, you mourn the role she can no longer play. The actress is exhausted, the curtain is falling, and suddenly you're left on stage alone, confused, furious, humiliated. But who wrote the script? You did. Who demanded the performance? You did. And now you curse her for stepping out of it. She was never meant to carry your salvation. She never agreed to be your therapist, your priest, your redemption. She came as a human, but you turned her into a symbol, and then blamed her when she cracked under the weight of it. You said, she changed, but what changed was your illusion. You said, she became distant, but it was you who distanced yourself the moment her humanity became inconvenient. She stopped being the dream and you couldn't handle reality. The truth is brutal. You didn't love her because she was real. You loved her because she wasn't. Because she let you believe, for a moment, that you were enough, that you were the man, that you were chosen, needed, worshipped. You were addicted to the feeling, not the woman. You were in love with your own reflection, cast onto her face. And when she stopped reflecting, you said she betrayed you. But the betrayal was yours. You betrayed yourself every time you silenced your gut to preserve the illusion. You betrayed her every time you smiled at her mask and ignored her eyes. You didn't fall in love, you fell into narrative. And you stayed there, because the role she played was easier to love than the truth she carried. So when she left, when it ended, when the silence returned, it wasn't her absence that hollowed you. It was the death of the fantasy, the collapse of the role. And now you stand alone, not grieving a woman, but grieving the part she no longer played. So now you know she didn't deceive you. You deceived yourself into thinking love was pure, into believing intuition was holy, into worshipping the mask she wore to survive you. And every time the truth clawed its way to the surface, you painted over it with romance. You called it loyalty, you called it passion, but it was denial. It was dependency. You kept asking the same question in different beds, will this one finally see me? But it was never about being seen. It was about staying blind. She never needed to manipulate you. She just needed to exist and let your fantasy do the rest. Because you were never fighting her. You were fighting your reflection in her eyes. And when she stopped showing you the version you needed, you broke. Not because she changed, but because she stopped playing the part. There is no moral to this story, no redemption arc, no light at the end. Just this: the only man who wins is the one who stops playing.